Hi, I'm Diana Yoakley. I'm a peaceful parenting coach and mom of three, and I'm delighted to give you the latest science backed research on child development, parenting, and to support you in showing up as the parent that you want to be. Welcome. Hello, hello. Welcome, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today for my podcast today. Today, I have here with me Olivia Bergeron. Welcome, Olivia. So nice to see you.
Thanks so much for having me, Diana.
Yeah, I'm really excited to speak with you today. We have an exciting topic. And before we get into our conversation, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of a background on Olivia's work. So, Olivia is a psychotherapist, parent coach, and speaker who founded Mommy Groove Therapy and Parent Coaching to support parents through the profound transitions that come with welcoming a child. As a mother of twins and a singleton herself, Olivia brings both professional expertise and personal understanding to the unique challenges of raising children in New York City. Olivia holds a bachelor's degree from Vassar College and a master's in clinical social work from New York University, along with postmaster's certificate in advanced clinical social work from NYU and specialized training from the Postpartum Stress Center. She was honored to be selected for the inaugural coaching training led by Dr. Laura Markham, author of Peaceful Parent Happy Kids. Yay! So we both trained with Dr. Laura, and she's passionate about helping parents move from reactivity to connection with their children. Olivia is fluent in Spanish and French, and her insights have been featured in New York Times, Huffington Post, Self Magazine, ABC News, TheBump.com, and Fox 5 New York. So welcome. I'm so delighted to have you here today.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure.
Yeah, and I'm really excited to pick your brain today about this concept that we were discussing before we hit record. This idea around how we can support parents in implementing lasting change to become more mindful, peaceful, calm, responsive versus reactive in parenting, and this idea of a loyalty bind. So I'll let you introduce this concept of something that you've come across in your work with clients, and we're going to share about it today. So yeah.
Yeah, well, again, Diana, thank you so much for having me. It's a real pleasure to be here.
Yeah.
Um, and so, having worked with parents for over 20 years, I was witnessing a trend, a phenomenon. Something was happening where parents would start out with the best intentions. They would get the tools. They would be very gung-ho about putting them into place. They wanted to make changes. Um, they were adamant about not wanting to parent the way that they were parented. So they would go and they would try the tools and the strategies, and they would come back, and after a little while, they would stop using them. So I was trying to figure out what is it that's getting in the way for folks. But again, it's not that the strategies aren't working per se, but
Yeah.
something is preventing them from actually implementing them. And I think, as a peaceful parenting coach, when we're giving parents these skills and strategies, I think they are really beneficial, and there's something you can put into place. But you have to do it over the long term. It's not a one and done. I'm going to try this, on Monday, and by Friday, I'm going to do something. I'm going to revert to what I know. So it really does have to be, a longer term dedication to the process of making a change. And yet people were having real difficulty over the long haul or even the medium term. So I
Yeah.
was thinking about, what is it that's again, what's the block? What is getting in the way? And so really considering my clients and their histories and working with people, it occurred to me that there's this loyalty. There's this unconscious loyalty that we have to our families of origin. Because when you do make
Yeah.
a change, you're admitting, my parents hurt me, or they did something to me as a child that I don't want to replicate, but that's pretty painful to admit that my parents, who I love very dearly, did some harm. Not intentionally, they did their best, no question. And yet there's this sense of if I do something different, then somehow I'm disloyal to my parents or my family of origin or my family background. Because
Yeah.
I think people start to resist the change, and then they start to, kind of justify it to themselves. Well, I turned out okay. It wasn't so bad. So we have a little bit of
Mhm.
revisionist history sometimes when we do go
Yeah.
back and look at our own families of origin, our own childhoods. Even though, so we're on this we're kind of straddling these both of these thoughts, right? One is that I know I don't want to replicate what I grew up with because it wasn't the best. On the other hand, if I do change, then I'm admitting that something was wrong. That my
Yeah.
parents again, they did their best, but I don't want to replicate that because it was not, it hurt me in some fashion.
Hmm. And I want to highlight that you had mentioned before, it's quite a subconscious process as well. It's like some of it, right? I hear you, you're saying like we have these thoughts, which you would think if we were conscious of our thoughts, we would hear that. But often we're not even conscious of our thoughts. They're just automatic, right? And even though they're there, we're not really downloading what that means.
Correct. So it's not that it's, again, on the surface, we want to change. That's why we're reading the books and we're listening to the podcasts
Yeah.
and we know that something here should shift or
Isn't
needs
working.
to shift.
Yeah.
It's not working. And
Right.
yet, why is it that we are, despite our best intentions, we're not able to follow through?
Yeah.
And one of the reasons I think is a sense of loyalty. Again, it's not on the surface per se, but I think it's undergirding our behavior. If I do something different from how my mom did it with me, then somehow, again, I'm pointing the finger of blame, or I'm saying this wasn't maybe the best way to parent.
Yeah.
And that feels really disloyal. It feels really
Yeah.
uncomfortable to sit with that. And so I
Yeah.
think that you might ask, well, what do you do with that then?
Yeah.
I think until we grieve our own
Mhm.
experience, then it's going to be really hard to actually make lasting change. So we're
Yeah.
kind of putting the cart before the horse if we say, all right, I grew up like this, I want to change, let me do it. But if you're not able to look under the hood and say, okay, what is it that's driving my desire to change? What is really
Hmm.
going on here? What does changing actually mean?
Yeah.
Then I think it's really difficult, challenging to put lasting change into effect.
Yeah, and I love that you're highlighting it's actually like subconsciously we're blocking ourselves from that transition, that change in habit. And I definitely agree with one of the like kind of the final like aha is the grief. But often it seems like the grief comes later. Like the grief comes kind of at the end of all of this processing and consciousness, and then we begin to actually change right after we are able to process the grief. But grief seems to be kind of one of the later phases from my
Hmm.
experience working with clients. Seems like a couple of the things that come before that, um, let's just say like somebody is working with a therapist or a coach and they bring up like how were you parented, and they begin defending their parents. And who was there for you when you were having a hard time? Well, I was kind of by myself. I was sent to my room. Like I got, I didn't really have anybody validating my emotions. And it's like, huh, how did that feel? Right. And we kind of go inward with them and support them in processing some of this. I see what you're saying about like they have this loyalty to the parent. They don't want to make it seem like the parent did something bad. But I also see this like the thing that comes out of that is why would a parent treat me badly? Is it because I wasn't good enough or because I was too much? So I wonder if you could speak a little bit more to that. And I know this is kind of like psychotherapy, kind of in the
Yeah,
coaching.
it's kind of bordering
It's
the
layered,
therapy,
right? Like,
but it is very layered. And I think that if we're able to kind of acknowledge two things at once,
yeah,
our parents did their best. They did their best
yeah,
with the tools that they had. They tried hard, they loved us, and
yeah.
they did what they thought was right.
Uh-huh.
And at the same time, that's not how I want to do it going forward with my kids. That's not good enough for me and for my family right now. And I hope, we as parents, we always want to be getting better. Each generation, you
Yeah,
hope, right, is improving upon the one that came before. And so this is a
yeah,
natural, I think if we reframe it not as a repudiation of our parents and how they did things, but more of this is an extension. They're
yeah,
passing us the baton and we're continuing forward in the race. And we're going to pass it on to our kids. And hopefully we keep improving with each generation.
yeah.
And it's okay not to be perfect, right? Peaceful parenting is all about that. And
Right.
yet, we just have to be good enough. We just have to be, our intentions need to be good. But I think if there's, instead of feeling like, well, I need to somehow be harsh or criticize or tell my parents that they were bad or what they did was completely wrong. Again, I don't think that that has to be the case whatsoever. Instead,
Yeah.
how do we look at it as okay, this is, again, they're passing the baton to me. How do I improve upon what I was given?
Mm-hmm.
How do I give
Mm-hmm.
my kids the tools and strategies that they need that maybe I didn't get? And I think sometimes, we kind of reparent ourselves at the same time.
Yes.
By giving our kids the tools, we start to practice them themselves. And so everybody grows. And that
Yeah.
only redounds to the good. This is a benefit. This is not a criticism. So this is, I
Yeah.
think, um, I think, it's not a betrayal of your parents. You're just completing their mission. And like I said, passing that baton to your own child so that
Yeah.
they can, do better with their kids, hopefully. Hopefully we keep improving.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and I like this idea of we don't have to do this perfectly because I think part of what creates this betrayal, like kind of box it again with this betrayal idea, is that if I admit that my parents did it wrong, that means I'm doing it right. But assuming like I'm doing it perfect, I'm going to fix it all because they made these mistakes. Whereas you can reframe it, like you were saying, my parents did the best that they could. And there's some things that they did that I want to do differently. And I will also make mistakes. I'm not actually going to be completing this full perfect cycle and fixing all of their mistakes because that, I think, just seeing it that way, for one, puts a lot of pressure on us as parents. And two, sounds like our parents were bad and wrong, right? Instead of looking at it like they were a work in progress. I'm a work in progress, and my kids will actually be a work in progress too. They're not going to be perfect little children. Like
No.
it's just this baton, like you said, this baton being passed on to the next runner. The race still goes, right?
Mhm.
Like the generations continue, but one runner isn't being held to this like high standard of like you're going to set it all straight, and that means everybody that came before you that couldn't, they were all bad and wrong. Does that make sense? I wonder if that is part of the
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that
subconscious
that's
like
that.
processing.
Yeah, I think that's beautifully put, and that we are, the race is never ending.
Yeah.
It's not like we are, okay, we are the grand poobahs of parenting now. And then that's it. We can kind of phone it in, call it a
Yeah.
day. That's not
Yeah.
the case. We will make mistakes. We are imperfect. No parent on this planet is perfect or somehow doing it, right 100% of the time. Does not exist. So it's okay, I think, to acknowledge that you will have your own errors and mistakes, and your kids will look back on you and say, I want to improve on that.
Yeah.
And that's, that's part of the cycle. And that's okay.
Yeah.
And I think if we're humble enough to recognize that, that's why I think if you're able to acknowledge that your parents made they made the best choices they could, with the resources they had at hand. We're doing the same thing. We're doing the best we have. Hopefully we're adequately resourced. And we want to keep
Yeah.
giving those things to our children so they can keep improving. But it's not, like I said,
Mm.
it's not a repudiation. It's not that's why I think we can reframe it not as, blaming our parents or somehow telling them that they did it all wrong.
Yeah.
They didn't. They were human. We're human. They did their
Yeah.
best.
Yeah. So how does yeah, so now that we've kind of settled that like everybody's a good person, but sometimes we have a hard time. Our parents are good people, sometimes they had a hard time and it impacted us. We're good people, sometimes we have a hard time in parenting and in life, just like every other human, and then we repair and we reconnect and we try to do better next time. It's not perfect. So what role does grief play in that and related to like healing, like you were saying? Until we can grieve how our own childhood happened. I'm just wondering if you could speak a little bit more to that.
Yeah, because it is an essential step. And I think that
Yeah.
that is part of the healing, as you said. And I think if we're not able to, and grieving means, you're surfacing and you're looking at it
Mm-hmm.
realistically and not like with rose-colored glasses, like, and being able to say, okay, my parents did a lot of things really well. Some things they
Mm-hmm.
didn't do well. Some things were hurtful or harmful, perhaps. And looking at that again and being able to sit with that as opposed to
Yeah.
justifying it, kind of doing handstands, trying to figure out like, how do I, give them some kind of cover for what they did. No, it's like that they're human and I can accept that. People make mistakes,
Mm-hmm.
full stop.
Mm-hmm.
And the grieving comes with being able to sit with that. And hopefully you're not, drowning in this pit of despair by any stretch, but you're able to, I liken it to, you're walking alongside the pit. Not that it's despair, but you're kind of walking along. So you see it's there, you recognize it, but I'm not going to go dive into the pool. I'm going to walk
Yeah.
around it and
Yeah.
say, I see it's there. I acknowledge it. It was a part of my life. It was a part of their life. But I'm not going to go get bogged down in that. I'm going to keep moving on and hopefully
Yeah. Yeah.
progressing, if that
Yeah.
makes sense. Because again, the idea is to, I think with grief, it's not just, one and done or, here, go grieve for a few days and come back. I think it comes in waves and it's not a linear process.
Mm-hmm.
But I think
Mm-hmm.
coming to grips with it, coming to terms with what you experienced as a child, it's being able to look at it realistically and with a kind of a true sense of what actually happened without
Yeah.
sugarcoating it, without feeling like, well, I need to kind of justify or rationalize or, it's just, well, this happened and it hurt me
Hmm. Yeah.
and it was not intentional. It was not something that they didn't desire to do that and it still hurt.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some questions when you're working with clients? What are some questions you ask them, or how do you get started on helping them kind of look inward and look at the past to identify things that would result in grief down in further sessions or kickstart the grief? So how
Yeah,
would
I mean,
people listening, parents listening might be like, well, there was nothing in my childhood. Like, how do you
well, if
start
I
surfacing
hope
that?
that's the case.
Yeah.
I'd be surprised, but I hope that's the case. I
Right.
think most people have something that, if you're looking to replicate exactly what you know, you probably wouldn't be looking into peaceful parenting because
Hmm.
you're not looking for, if it was, 100% fantastic all the time, then why look outside for other ways to do it or more
Right.
suggestions, So I think that
Right.
just the
Right.
fact that people are, and I think it's a
Listening.
good thing. We're searching for strategies and solutions and things that will help. We're kind of doing
Yeah.
research. And now that we have,
Right.
internet and podcasts and everything else at our fingertips, AI, it makes it easier to do that research. So where we are, then I think on the flip side, we're inundated with so much information. It can be hard to
Yeah.
parse what is actually helpful and useful. What is it that I actually want to, use and what do I want to discard?
Hmm.
But I do think for parents, again, the idea that I want to be the best I can be. And
Yeah.
I think that that to me is ultimately the goal, right? We all want to be good parents. And nobody
Hmm.
comes knocking on our door saying like, "Well, I want to just status quo." We don't, and there's
Yeah.
something that's driving them. So I think that, if working with somebody, you asked how do we kind of unpack and get to that grieving piece, I think it's
How do we
taking.
help parents reflect on their own childhoods, right? When they're
Well,
not, when they haven't looked.
yeah, but I think that's why asking the questions like, how did your parents handle discipline? What did they do? How did they express their upset with you? How
Yeah.
did you feel like you were able to share with them when you were scared or disappointed or had something on your mind? What was that like? What was the communication style in your home?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so we're starting to get at then, again, it's not to point the finger of blame. It's not to say, like, okay, that's the reason why. That's the reason why
Right.
you're here. Because your mom yelled at you. That's really not the intention at all. It's just to say, okay, this is what you grew up with. This is what you
Hmm.
know.
Right.
So it
These
makes
are the
sense that,
patterns that you've
right.
adapted to. Hmm.
So when you are stressed, tired, when your child has worked your last nerve, which they will do,
Yeah.
they have a real specialty in that sometimes. You revert to what you know, and that is what you grew up with. Unless you're
Hmm.
very, very cognizant and very clear and have made really deliberate choices to do something different, which is what people come to us for help in, I assume, I think most of the time. They
Hmm.
don't want to replicate what they did before or what their parents did with them because something's not working.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's why giving them the tools and the strategies without doing a little bit of unpacking as to, well, what was it like in your family of origin? What would it be like for you to do something different? Maybe getting into a little bit of, what does that represent for you? Is you know, in the culture of your family, what does that mean
Hmm.
to kind of break from that or to do something, to shift and to pivot and to do something different? Is that disloyal or is this a sense of, is, this, is, this, growth? How would your family of origin consider that?
Hmm.
Most of the time I would hazard to say there is some sense of, 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 there is some time I would ha hazard to say there is some sense of, well, what are you doing? Why are you doing that?
Right.
What was wrong with how I did it? You turned out okay.
Yes.
So I think that there's automatically this sense of like, well, it kind of gets their back up. They get a little defensive.
Yeah, and I think
Um,
most parents experience going back to like family of origin with their kids now, if they don't all see them all the time, it creates this conflict in their parenting because they're used to parenting a certain way when they're with their own nuclear family and then they go see
right.
their parents or in-laws, and then suddenly it's hard.
Because you're not
Yeah,
getting the outward support. And instead, people are questioning you and saying like, well, why are you doing it that way? Why are you
yeah,
not punishing your kid? Why didn't you send them to the room? Why? And then you start to be questioning. So you feel like a little defensive yourself. Like I need to explain, justify, rationalize.
yeah. Yeah. Or even sometimes parents, I think they get like they start reverting back to old behaviors because it's like now this child's meltdown has put me on the spot and I don't want to be disloyal with my parents. I wish they would just stop their the defiance, the child. Why do you have to be so difficult while we're here? And kind of the child then gets it sometimes, right? Like it can go either way. Either the parent, I think, is able to break that like commitment to the previous generation and commit to the child in front of them, or it almost like they switch back into the role of the child with their parent around, and now their own child becomes like the opposing like force, like just shut down the meltdown, like don't be so difficult while we're here because I have to choose between myself as a new identity as a parent and the loyalty bind with the traditional family, like the his yeah
Right. Which
family
is why I
origin.
think, family holidays can be really challenging. Um,
Yeah.
and I'm all about coping in advance. Cope ahead. If you know
Yeah.
this is going to happen, if you know you're going to be
Mm-hmm.
challenged about the way you're doing things, and this is, whether or not you feel like you have a loyalty issue or not, um, you know, talking it out with your partner, with your child, what the expectations are, letting your
Mm-hmm.
family of origin know, I appreciate, you know, if you would keep your insights, your comments to after the fact or at a later time, when I'm in the thick of it with my child, I just want to be able to, parent in the way that, in the style that I'm using without any interference.
Yeah. And even saying that, I think for some adult parents can be really hard, maybe even impossible,
Well, that's
because there
why,
might be like a culture of you don't question the elders, like the parents are the
sure.
wisest, and you do not question their parenting, especially if they are a proud parent.
Like
If
I
they
did it.
always
I'm
have,
like the best parent ever. Yeah,
yes,
which is
like
why
there's nothing I would
again,
ever do wrong.
if you can get ahead of it, I think, and if you can have those
Hmm.
conversations before you're face to face, before you're in the thick of it,
Yeah.
just giving people heads up what to expect, what you would like to have happen. Now that you're just putting it out there, you're not demanding it. You're saying it would
Yeah.
help me if you would do X, Y, or Z. It would help me if, when I'm having a conversation with my child after something, a mishap or something goes south or sideways, that I'm the one that handles it. Yeah, and
Yeah.
they might take that as a little bit, offense, or they might take it, get a little defensive. But I think what you're trying to do is lay out the groundwork that I appreciate you, and
Yeah.
not but, and
Yeah.
we're doing it this way.
Yeah. This interdependence instead of codependence, or, total like abolishment of like family structure, right? Like, yeah, being interdependent, being in relationship with our own parents as the new parents now, and at the same time having boundaries and having choice and identity. And you know what I'm thinking of too? Like Gabor Mate talks a lot about like children need attachment and autonomy.
Mhm.
And to me, it sounds like this loyalty bind is like a fractured autonomy of the parents' own autonomy in childhood, maybe growing up, and that they're still struggling with that, being autonomous with their with the grandparents, right? Like we
Correct.
haven't actually developed our own full autonomy as adults yet, and this is a growing edge.
I think that's a fantastic way to look at it, and I think that if you are still under the umbrella of your parents, and how do you step out and open your own umbrella,
Yeah.
and so you can have your own way of doing things, and they had their way of doing, they had their own chance to make their own mistakes. Let me make mine. But I think
Yeah.
that autonomy piece is key, and being able to affirm that in a kind, loving way. I don't think you have to be a jerk about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I think if you're pretty matter of fact and just, yeah, this is how we're doing it, without, twisting yourself into knots to explain, and here's why, and here's the research and the studies, and go read this blog or whatever. But I think if you're calm and confident and able to put
Yeah.
this forth and just say, this is how we're doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, without
Mm-hmm.
having to add too much more.
Yes.
Which
Yes.
is where, again, I think when you start to kind of spin your wheels and try to explain and try to justify and rationalize, that comes across as, well, maybe you're not so sure.
Right.
Comes
And
across
then
as a little,
they poke holes in like your plan a
right.
little
And they're
bit,
like,
right?
well, you don't really mean it. I'm going to do my way anyway. And they might anyway. I mean, parents can be a little stubborn.
Yeah.
But I think that if you put it out there and kind of course correct that, ahead of time, if you're able to give them a heads up, that really heads off a lot of issues and problems, I think.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that you're speaking to this. So I think there's like a couple different paths that the listeners of this podcast might be like feeling like they're on. I think this scenario we just kind of described, like getting ahead of it and actually having the intention and being able to like speak about it and processing some of your own grief, that's kind of a best case scenario, right? And I want to kind of backtrack to another track. So let's say a parent is having a hard time with their kid, they're looking at resources, and maybe their kid is like neurodiverse, so does have like extra challenges. But even in those cases, we would still say that if your family of origin for yourself was not like a secure attachment, responsiveness, it'll just add more fuel to the fire, right? Regardless of whether your kid is challenging or easy, right? It's always two people in a relationship that bring stuff to the table.
Mm.
But I'm wondering about those parents when they start looking like this path of parents that when you ask them, who was there for you, what did your parents do for discipline, and if that parent says like, yeah, I got in trouble, yeah, I got spanked, I got yelled at, but I deserved it, that was the right, they did the right thing, like I think and maybe probably peaceful parents would, like people listening to this podcast probably wouldn't be like, yeah, it's right to spank kids or yell at them, but maybe they would defend their parent in some way still and be like, they I was a troublemaker. It
But
was
this
my
is,
fault. It wasn't their fault. And then they can't actually break away from that, even like to get started, right? Like they don't
but
see themselves as
that's the loyalty bind.
that is
You
it
know,
right there.
that's it right there in a nutshell. It's they did this to me,
Defending the parent, and I was a
correct,
bad kid. They're the good parent.
right? So I'm giving a reasoning. This is the rationale that they have. Well, I was bad, so of course they had to spank me. But I'm not going to
Yeah.
spank my kid. I don't want to do that. So yeah, there's this kind of disconnect between
Yeah.
their own lived experience and what they want to propagate for the future.
Yeah.
Um, and so that's if we can kind of sit there and help people see, okay, how do we make this leap from
Yeah.
change is not disloyal. Change is
Mm-hmm.
growth. Instead of,
Mm.
again, somehow I am criticizing or judging or telling my parents they did it wrong or bad, or that's really not the intention. The intention is instead to, again, passing that baton. Let's keep it moving. Let's keep advancing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So it sounds like it's a series of, like when parents come for support, it's a series of kind of planting some seeds around what was your childhood like in a very like non-direct way, right? In some ways, because if you go for it like in a very direct way and even like maybe assuming that might be one of the causes, the person's going to shut down because they're protective over their parent. They
Of
don't want
course.
to go there.
Right. Which is why, and not everybody is in this boat.
Yep.
So I wouldn't go into a session just, assuming that, well, this is the case, and let me tell you why. This is why you're
Mm-hmm.
having a challenge.
Right.
Instead, it's okay. Well, let's work on the tools. Let's work on the strategies. Report back, see what's working, see what's not working. Okay. And if you seem to be having difficulty, implementing this over the medium and the long term, well, let's dive into that. What is standing in the way? What is making this
Mm-hmm.
challenging for you?
Mm-hmm.
And I think you're correct. It's not something that people have maybe at the top of their mind. But I do think that if you're able to dig a little bit and say, well, again, talking about the family of origin and
Yeah.
then pursuing that, what would it mean for you in your own family that you're creating right now to do it differently? What do you think your own family of origin would think about that? How is it that you feel about making that change? What does that actually, um, what does that mean for you and your own sense of, as a parent, is that disloyal? Would it be taken as offensive um, by other people in your family? And then what is it like for you? Do you feel somewhat on some level that that's the case too? Does it feel like it's, challenging the expectations that you grew up with and trying to build new expectations for behavior? Is that on some level disloyal? Does that mean that you are turning your back against, to your family?
Mm-hmm.
And if that's the case, well, let's unpack that. Let's look at that. Is that actually what's going on? Can we reframe that?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's so insightful. And this idea of like enmeshment, with parents can be probably like kind of intertwined with some of that. I mean, I think the term enmeshment is a broader category,
Yeah.
but it can apply to various other things. But I'm wondering, as parents listening now, how do we prevent ourselves from doing that to our own kids? what would the parent need to have done in order for the child to not feel the loyalty bind going forward? And what
Yeah,
can we do now as parents? Yeah.
yeah, it's an excellent question. I think first of all, if it is just below the surface and you're not acknowledging it, then nothing's going to change.
Yeah.
So first things first, I think you need to surface that and look at it. Is this something that's happening with me?
Yeah.
Am I reenacting what I grew up with as a child because doing something different feels disloyal? It feels like it's something that, um, means that my parents were bad on
Hmm.
some level.
Hmm.
And I think once that is out on the surface, then how do we not do this with our own kids? I think that knowledge is absolutely the first step, and that is your ace in the hole. Because if you're aware of it, then okay, I see what's going on here. I see what's getting in the way.
Right.
And I think
Hmm.
by giving your child permission to and not shaming them or blaming them because they do want to try something different, or they do want to, again, if you are able to look at it as, of course, I want them to do it better than I'm doing it.
Yeah.
Of course, I want the next generation to be better parents than we are.
Hmm.
And if that's the goal ultimately, without thinking that, again, I am somehow I need to achieve this level of parenting that is impeccable, that is,
Right.
100%, that is kind of
Right.
bulletproof.
Yeah.
That's not the
And
goal.
complete, like completely done and
Yeah.
100% and like,
We're always on the path. We're never arriving.
hmm.
We never get to some destination that means that, okay, yes, now I'm, the best parent, or now I'm doing
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
100% right all the time. It just
Yeah.
doesn't happen.
Yeah.
But if
Yeah.
you're able to look at it again as a continuum, on a journey, you're kind of again pushing the ball forward, trying to um, always trying to improve and always giving our children permission, I think, to know that, yeah, I make mistakes too.
Yeah.
And this to me is a huge component because if your child feels that you are somehow perfect or you're putting it out there that, mom doesn't make mistakes,
Yeah.
well, that's not accurate.
Right.
You are allowed to fail. You are allowed to make mistakes. We all do. That's part of being human.
Yeah.
And you don't want your child to, internalize a sense that, well, I have to be perfect in order to be loved.
Right.
I imagine we want our children to feel loved because of who they are, not what they do.
Hmm.
And that starts with us.
Right.
That starts with our own sense of self-worth and okay, I'm a good parent. I'm a good person.
Hmm. Not
And I
because of
make
what I do in parenting, but
Yeah,
who
and I make
I'm the
mistakes
best.
for
Yeah.
who I am. I'm a good parent, full stop.
Yeah.
I try hard, I fall down, I get back up, I do my best. I make repairs. I'm constantly learning.
Yeah.
And that maybe is the important piece. That this is the mindset piece of, it's constant growth, it's continual growth. It's not okay, now I have all the information, I read all the right books, and now I'm done. No,
Yeah.
I think it's ongoing.
It's the growth mindset.
Right.
Hmm.
We can always improve.
Yeah. Yeah. And that is, I mean, we talked about like there's no such thing as perfect parenting, but I think this parenting approach is pretty holistic because it incorporates repair, which allows you to make mistakes and come back. I mean, I would say you wouldn't be parenting holistically if you didn't reconnect with your child, if you're never repaired verbally or even like just non-verbally, if you left like a gap between you and like let the walls like build, right? That would not be holistic per se, right? Um, but there's no way to like perfectly parent, but there is we're including these elements that compensate for when we are imperfect and what do we do when we slip up and self-compassion for ourselves. And so I would say it is very like well-rounded, but it's not like perfection, right? Like the approach there's things you can do when you slip up and it has room for that. And like you said, the path is getting back on track. It's not getting to the end of like this road, right? Because life is just a journey. The whole
Mhm.
purpose is to stay on the journey and to come back and reconnect and repair and
Yeah, 100%. And, that's why that and we want our children to do the same.
yeah.
We want them to have the same mindset where again, it's not like um, I study and I ace the test and that's the end of it. I never have to study again.
Right. Right. Yeah.
It's I'm consistently learning, I'm growing, and that process is never done. And that's okay. You're not supposed to be like, figuring it all out or having some moment where eureka, that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You can have
Yeah.
your eureka moments and hopefully, you can apply those on a regular basis.
Yeah.
But I think giving yourself the grace to know that, okay, like I am, again, I'm learning, I'm growing, and my child will be doing the same.
Hmm.
And that's okay.
Yeah. Yeah, I know there's a researcher, Ed Tronick, and his research showed that, like, for secure attachment to be established with a child, the parent has to be attuned about 30 to 35% or so of the time. So that means, like, you have about 70% of the time you can be misattuned, you can mess up,
Hmm.
you can make like all these, obviously, like exemption of like extreme like trauma, like acute trauma,
Right.
but these other like misalignments, misconnections, even like yelling and things like that. If we're able to repair and we come back to that and we work on improving 30% of the time, it's good enough parenting. So we don't, it's not like this perfection standard. There's actually a lot of room for misattunement and mistakes
And that's how you
to
learn.
raise a healthy child.
Oh, and
Yeah, and
that's, I
that's
would
how.
argue, and that's how you learn. Okay, gosh, I like did not
Yeah,
do it the way I wanted to last night with my kid. What can I do
yeah,
differently? Because
yeah,
that same event is probably going to happen again. And how am
yeah.
I going to handle it this time?
Hmm.
So giving some thought and learning from that. I think that's what the growth mindset is about.
Yeah.
And I think I had read that statistic too. You just have to be attuned like 30% of the time. Well, again, that means that 70% you're not in, you're not in the same orbit.
Yeah, yeah,
Um,
yeah.
and that's okay. That's how we are in relationship.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, I have so many more questions, and I know we have to wrap up, but I want to ask this question. This is, I think, a really important one. So let's say a person listening, a parent listening to the podcast, they're like, yeah, I'm bought in. I'm doing my own work, or looking at my own childhood patterns, but my partner or my child's co-parent is does have a loyalty bind, is not willing to look at this, feels like their parents did it the best way and there's nothing wrong with how their parents parented, and these couple dynamics. How can the person listening that doesn't want their child to feel like they're exposed to the other parents, like these blind spots, but of course they know they can't change the other co-parent directly, what can they do?
Well, I think you can model by parenting in the way that you feel good about. Oftentimes, having worked with clients for so many years now, I think once the co-parent kind of gets wind or sees that this is effective, oftentimes they come around.
Yeah,
It's like, well, let me see. Oh, okay. Our son seems to be listening to you without without you needing to yell or repeat things 10 times.
yeah,
What
or
is it that you're
punish
doing with it?
them or
Or
take
punish
away
or
the
get harsh?
screen. Yeah.
Yeah, or bribe them or what have you.
Yeah, correct.
So oftentimes I think if you're able to model that this is effective, people and partners tend to come around. I think if instead you come out them and say, this is the way to do it, you need to change. Automatically
Right.
people, the walls go up. It's like, why you can't tell me what to do.
Hmm.
And so I think being mindful of, this is what, and vocalizing and telling your partner, this is what I'm doing and why. I'm trying this
Hmm.
strategy, I'm trying this tool, because bath times are really challenging at night, and I'm going to try something different. I would love
Yeah.
it if you would, help me along with that. But if you want to, take a wait and see attitude, that's fine too.
What if
But,
they say something like, well, that's not how I was raised, and I think I was raised great. And so I want to do it the way that I was raised because my
well,
parents
I
did it so
wouldn't,
perfectly,
yeah,
kind of thing, right?
I wouldn't challenge that belief to say, well, you think you were raised so great? I don't know about that. Like, look at you, look at how you turned out.
Or even
Perfect.
like, I don't agree with like, sending the kid to the room when they're upset. I want to talk about it with them. I want to co-regulate, and you're separating them. And like, that's not what the science shows. But if they say,
Well,
I turned out fine, like, and then they kind of criticize your parenting, I guess that becomes like a couples conflict then too, you know?
which is when they come into therapy, couples counseling. No,
Yeah.
but seriously, I mean, I think that if you are able to get curious, well, tell me about what your experience was like when
Hmm.
you said to do, your parent wanted you to do something and you did it. How did they get that to happen? Were you scared of them? I think you can kind of unpack and kind of see what was actually going on and get them to talk about it and to communicate.
Hmm.
So I think engaging your own sense of curiosity
Okay. Yeah.
as opposed to, again, I'm going to lecture you or tell you or like,
Yeah.
here's the podcast you need to listen to, or here's the blog you need to read. No, it's more like, well, this is something that was interesting to me. I'm happy to share more about that. And I want to be curious. I want to learn more about how you did it,
Mm-hmm.
what your expectations
Mm-hmm.
are. How do you
Mm-hmm.
see this? It just,
Yeah.
instead of coming at somebody, you can kind of come alongside,
Right. Yeah. And
you
that
know.
seems to kind of open up the doors for like to help them begin to reflect on maybe like again speaking to that grief, which I think you probably need therapy to actually access that grief, but a spouse can begin, or I don't know, maybe.
Mhm.
I mean, I don't see them like breaking down and being like, "You're right, it was not great," like.
No,
But
because,
maybe I don't know.
but what does admitting that mean? I mean, again, it means it's loyalty, right? It's my parents.
Right.
My parents were not maybe the most ideal in every situation. And I think that that's something everybody can agree with. Our parent, no parent is ideal in every situation. But I think if that soft approach, that opening, that willingness to talk about, well, share with me. I want to know what it was like. What was an evening in your household? What did that look like? When you were 8 or 9 or 10, and it was a school
Yeah.
night, and you had a project that was due, or something like. What was that like for you? What did your parents
Yeah.
do? How did you feel about that? What was it like being on the receiving end?
Yeah.
And that I think is key too. That empathy piece. What do you
Mm-hmm.
think it's like for our child when you ask that, or when you say that? Again, it's the curiosity. You're not saying like, well, doing it in a kind of a leading kind of a way. But it's
Right.
like, it's more like, well, what do you think? How did Sam respond when you said that?
And if they say like, well, I deserved it, that kind of thing, right? We talked about that earlier. Like, well, I deserved it. I got in trouble and I deserved it. I got grounded and I deserved it. And so our kid deserves it. Yeah. How does a co-parent respond to that?
Well, I think, no one deserves to be hurt or yelled at, or, I think zooming out and looking at what is our ultimate goal here?
Hmm.
I imagine, we want our child to learn and to do these things autonomously, not because
Yeah.
we're looking over their shoulders, but because, they're doing the right thing because it's the right thing to do when no one's watching.
Hmm.
And how do we get to that place?
Hmm.
And kind of again unpacking this. Well, again, my parents punished me and I turned out fine, or they did this to me, and look at me now. And I think you can say, and you're a wonderful person, and that's why I'm together with you. It's not that
Right.
you're questioning that.
Right.
And let's look at, what was effective, what we want to bring forward, and what we want to leave behind.
Hmm.
I think that is a fruitful conversation, and I encourage, the
Hmm.
pregnant and the new parents to do that too. What is it in our family of origins that is
Yeah.
important to us, that we do want to bring forward? And what is it that we're maybe not so keen to replicate?
Hmm.
And I think it's okay to look at, but I think if there's an opening to both, it's not just, so what do you want to leave behind? What is it that your parents did that you don't want to do? I mean, that to me is like, well, again, that's pretty
It's
harsh
one-sided.
and
Yeah.
one-sided, and it doesn't see the full picture.
Right.
Because again, we're all rounded people. It's not like we're two-dimensional. We all
Right.
have, a lot of history and culture and, individual
Yeah.
family culture that comes with it. And then when you're merging two family cultures together as parents, you didn't grow up in your partner's household. You don't really
Right.
know what it was like. They
Yeah.
didn't grow up in your household. They don't know what it was like. And yet, how do we as parents, again, pick and choose what we want to, how do we merge these two
Yeah.
households into our own household,
Hmm.
into our own
Hmm.
family culture?
Yeah.
But I think that if
Yeah.
you're kind of winging it, or shooting from the hip and kind of making decisions on the fly, then it will be a little confusing for your child, because chances are, mom does it one way, dad does it a different way, and I think that can be confusing and inconsistent.
Hmm.
That being said, if there's more, whoever's leading the activity is making the calls, if that's kind of what the parenting culture is, okay, then it's less confusing for the child,
Right. Right.
because somebody's taking the lead. Okay. And I think,
Hmm.
after the fact or before, you can have a conversation. Well, how do we want this to go? And I always believe, start at the end and kind of back up. What is our goal? What are we trying to achieve? And then how do we get there?
Yeah, because so often I think in couples, like we actually do align with our partners on like those core things about what we want our child to, grow up like, what's important to us for their future. We
Mhm.
do often align on those core kind of universal values of raising a human. And like you said, it's how we get there.
It's the
And
details.
It's the details. And when you were saying, like, when we ask our partners, like, how did your parents respond? And if they say, like, well, I got in trouble and I was fine, I think our kid needs to be in trouble to learn a lesson. It becomes a conversation around, like, what type of parenting principles actually are more effective. And it kind of leads to this conversation, like, maybe our parents, the grandparents, they did the best they could because this information wasn't available back then. We
True.
didn't have this, like, neuroscience from Dan Siegel talking about the whole brain child and the nervous
Hmm.
system, polyvagal theory, like, what does safe look like? What does fight, flight, freeze look like? Right? Like, now we have so much more research back evidence that actually can support these practices. They didn't have that, so it's not their fault. It's just they didn't actually. It was an information gap, not an intention
Correct.
deficit, right?
Yep. I think
So now we
that's
can
well
download
said.
new software.
Yeah, and now that we
Yeah.
have information, then, at our fingertips, I think
Yeah.
we have a responsibility to, dive into
Yeah.
it, to not
Right.
ignore it, that it's there, to make use of it, knowing that some things are going to land with us and some things won't.
Right. Right.
And how do we pick and choose how we want to do it in our household, with our family,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
being okay with that. That it doesn't have to be, a replication of either one family or the other.
It's a blend
You can
of
form
some
something
kind,
new.
plus
You can form something
new.
new.
Yeah. Something new. Yeah, I love that. I love this conversation. So good. I know we're over our time. I would love to wrap up with, for those people listening on the go, where they can find out a little bit more about your work and resources. And then we'll also link the links below in the podcast so people can click on them directly. But yeah, if
Yeah,
you'd like to
no,
share.
anyone is welcome to reach out through my website, mommygroove.com.
Mm-hmm.
I'm also on the socials, TikTok, Instagram,
Yeah.
LinkedIn, Facebook. You can look for me again at Mommy Groove. I'd be happy
Yeah.
to, answer any questions if people have want to reach out for help. I do have a special new program I'm starting called the Good Mom Reset, and
Mm-hmm.
that is it's a limited time. It's a short uh, time working with me. It's 75 minutes. You get your individual
Mm-hmm.
session. We come up with an action plan. I send that to you 24 hours later. Then you come back
Mm-hmm.
for a 20-minute session with me to kind of hone and refine and make sure you're on the right path. So that's a new
Oh, that's
offering.
amazing. Yeah.
Happy to send people information about that if they like. But yeah,
Yeah.
reach out to me on
Mm-hmm.
my website, mommygroove.com.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. This was really, really valuable and such a new angle to look at this kind of subconscious player at hand that could throw us off track. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you, Dinah.